Hello. This whiteboard session is about Scrum. Scrum is an agile method for agile product development and IT software development. It is based on a mindset that came from the Agile Manifesto. Software developers that questioned the standard way of developing software in terms of concept, development, test and launch, and said we need a more flexible way of doing this. And they developed the Agile Manifesto with different components. One was that they wanted to work with people together and not just with standard processes. They wanted to build software instead of working on long documentation. And they wanted to be able to adapt to change flexibly and not just follow a standard given process. And this is something that went into the Scrum idea. And Scrum was developed and introduced by Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber. Now let's dig into detail how Scrum works. First of all, we have a backlog. A backlog is a kind of store where we store our ideas. For example, features, functionality. And we sort them by business value. So the highest business value is on top and the lowest is at the bottom. And we describe these features with user stories. And then we combine it with a kind of estimation on how complex it is to implement. So features sorted by business value and described with a feature set and also complexity. And then we have different iterations where we develop, based on this, we develop features and IT software. We call these iterations sprints. And within a sprint, we do similar stuff than we do in sequential projects. For example, concept, implementation, test, and launch. Always with the aim to have final functionality software developed at the end. The big difference is that these iterations normally take 2 to 4 weeks instead of several months. So every 2 to 4 weeks, we have a new layer of software or product features that we could launch. How does this look in day-to-day work? At the start of a sprint, we would do a planning meeting. We would review what is part of the backlog and we would pull the features that we want to implement within the specific sprint. At the end of the 2 to 4 weeks, we would do a review meeting and check what we did. And afterwards, we would do another planning meeting and again check what is now on top of the backlog and pull from that. So based on the backlog, we would implement step by step. Now the magic happens. Let's assume we are Spotify, the music streaming service, and we're just in the middle of a sprint. Now something happens. Apple, for example, also offers streaming music, and they have a kind of recommendation function that we don't have yet. So what we would do is we would not stop the sprint we are already working on, we would just finalize it because we have frozen the scope for that sprint and we would finalize it. But what would happen in parallel, we would add new functionality to our backlog. So let's say recommendation functionality that we did not have yet is not, let's say, queuing from the back because it was last in, it would just jump to the top. And we would finalize the current sprint, but as soon as we would do the next planning meeting, we would review the scope of the backlog and we would, rather than doing what we had initially planned, we would pull the new features and would implement these in the following sprint. So the advantage of Scrum as a methodology is that we can pull within our planning meeting from our backlog based on the business value and the capacity we have as a team. And we can flexibly adapt to requirements. So altogether, Scrum is a flexible framework to develop products and software based on a backlog where we store ideas and sprints where we flexibly adapt to what is required based on business value. There's 3 roles that we need to understand that manage the overall flow. First of all, we have the product owner. The product owner is responsible for the backlog planning, the prioritization of the items in the backlog and the business value that is associated to it. Second, we have the development team. typically the architect and the software developers that develop software. And third, we have the Scrum Master, which is a kind of facilitator of the processes. It's not a project manager, but it's the person that is responsible for the different meetings. For example, the planning meeting, the review meeting, the daily stand-up meeting, and the retrospective that we do every 6 to 8 weeks, a kind of feedback process, a feedback meeting where we understand what runs well and what we need to improve. In addition to this picture of Scrum, there's another visualization that focuses more on a specific sprint. We have the product backlog, where we have features and ideas that we want to implement. And then we pull from this product backlog the so-called sprint backlog, which is the features that we want to implement in the specific sprint. And then we do the sprint, where implementation takes place, and this typically takes 2 to 4 weeks. Within the sprint, we do so-called stand-up meetings that happen on a daily basis. And within the stand-up meetings, we answer 3 questions. What did we do yesterday? What are we doing today? And what prevents us from moving forward? The impediments, the roadblocks that we need to move away. And the final product is some potential shippable software, for example, the features that we implemented within the sprint. And this was our overview on Scrum.